What's up, gamer? We have Cyberpunk to review.
This is it, everybody. This is our moment together. Today, we review the most anticipated game of 2020, FIFA 13 Soccer, with a GameStop case. Now, of course, we're talking about the Punk. I've had Cyberpunk 2077 for about a week at this point in time, thanks to CD Projekt Red for providing that review code. I've logged over 50 hours into the game, completing the main story, doing a lot of side content and other activities throughout the open world, and we're going to be talking about story, gameplay, choices, design, sound, everything in this review here to give you the most thorough coverage of Cyberpunk 2077. Of course, that will all be spoiler free. But before we dive into the full official review for Cyberpunk 2077, a bit of a sus alert. So as I've made sure to choose my words carefully, this is the official review here on my channel. On Monday, you saw myself as well as many others release what some people called reviews. Some people took those reviews and then compiled them even though they didn't have access to the game and called them reviews. But anyway, those were more like impressions because we could not show gameplay here on YouTube explaining what we liked or even what we disliked when it came to Cyberpunk 2077. Now that was in the name of no spoilers, but let's be honest, this game was buggy as hell and they were trying to hide that. So do be aware that this was a very shady, strange request from a company. Normally they just let you post the game and show your thoughts and display visual examples of what you're talking about. But in this case, they wanted you to use trailers, their own B-roll gameplay, which I was just like, no, I'll just talk to the camera and hope people listen, which a lot of you did. Thank you for that. Number 2, epilepsy warning. So Game Informer posted a really important article highlighting that there are specific triggers in this game. So do be aware of this if you suffer from it or you have a friend who suffers from it. Apparently CD Projekt Red is already working on something for this. It's due to the brain dancing in the game, which of course I will not be showing inside this video here because I don't want to have any issues for anyone else either. Number 3, no one tested this game on console as of this moment in time outside of the people making the game, and that is a little bit strange. All of us who reviewed the game reviewed it on PC. So hopefully things are good on the console space, but do know this is where my review is coming from on the PC. Now, to set the stage, I believe this game lived up to the hype, but that was my personal hype. You can go ahead and check out the catalog of videos I have on my channel. There have been multiple instances throughout news updates or even a specific video in the past where I've called for people to chill out with the CD Projekt Red overhyping. They are really, really talented, but no matter how much talent is there, people have built them up so high that a lot of people are going to be disappointed because they think this game is going to be the best open world game, action adventure game, role-playing game. It's going to be best shooter, and it's a very, very good game. It lived up to my hype, but some people have these sky-high expectations that no company in any world could ever match. So just know, I think it lived up to the hype, but my hype for CD Projekt Red is a lot more leveled and I think rather normal than I think some others out there. Now, with all of that in mind, here we go. Let's get into it, starting off with the story. Once again, spoiler-free, both gameplay-wise as well as what I'm going to be reading to all of you. You play as V, a mercenary who's trying to make her mark in Night City. Your version of V can be as detailed as you'd like, from body tattoos to cybernetic markings, even your teeth. Yes, the genitalia as well. Your V is truly yours in every way, shape, and form, which is welcome to people like me who spend an easy hour here just customizing your character. You're also going to select, as you've probably heard already, your life path, which is your origin story, the backdrop to your character. It's organized similarly to what you've seen in Mass Effect and Dragon Age Origins, where your pick influences parts of the world around you, as well as your beginning of the game. Now, I went with Nomad because it reminds me of Fallout, and it's absolutely awesome, but there are still 2 others you can pick from, which are the Corpo, as well as the Street Kid. And it wasn't until 5.5 hours deep into this game that I actually hit the title card with the game's name on it. And it gives you this sensation like it's going to be a gargantuan story. Like, what? That was a 5-hour prologue. How big is this game going to be? But it is 25 hours long. I said this in my impressions. Took me 25 hours to beat. I pretty much straight shot the story because I did expect it to be much longer, but I was happy to discover that was not the case. I love The Witcher 3, but I thought Act 2 really bloated the whole experience, and I thought it lost a lot of its pacing and it became unnecessarily longer than it should have been, and a lot of people didn't finish The Witcher 3 because of that, amongst maybe other reasons. So point being is, some folks were saying they were very disappointed by that length, but those 25 hours are consistently very good. That is the difference maker, where you're not going to be having pacing issues, where every moment on screen is worthwhile. Also, I played it in a way that I don't think many will play it. I shot straight through the main story because I wanted to see it through to the end and then do some of the side content. Most of you should and probably will be mixing in side content with your main story playthrough, so it may be even longer before you actually roll credits on the final story. Now, you can keep playing after the game's completion, and there is dozens of hours of content left on the map, and I could easily hit well over 100 hours to do everything here in the game. Cyberpunk 2077's story is a complex, mature narrative weaving in multiple themes matching up beautifully with its universe through a prologue, 3 acts, and an epilogue. The ideas behind the storytelling really resonated, such as discovering a sense of self. What is your purpose in life? How selfish are the people around you? And what the heck would you do if Keanu Reeves was with you everywhere you went? You see, everyone's after this chip, a chip that is the key to immortality. And I've always found myself wondering in the game as I was playing, how could you get me to care about this? How could you get me to care about the ambitions of others in an RPG where I care about what affects my character? But it effortlessly swept me off my feet consistently and grabbed my interest every single time. Now, I don't want to talk about the who's or what's, okay? I want you to discover that for your own. But the story has a revolving door of compelling characters that drive the experience to another level. The writing really shines when you deviate from the main story and do the side quest lines that branch out for multiple hours. Now, not all of them do this. I want to emphasize that. A lot of people thought when I was talking in my impressions and I talked about multi-hour side quest arcs, these are more character specific, okay? It's not every single one. Some of them are very quick one and dones, and they'll take you all of 15 minutes. Some of them are, as I mentioned, a lot more extensive to a length that I haven't seen in a very long while, and it was refreshing, especially since the quality was so high. Not only do these side quests impact your story and how it ends, but they're also the highlights of the game, in my opinion. The choices here are more diverse and interesting, and while I appreciate the complexity of the main tale, things are much more narrowed down here in the side quest line since it's focusing on a smaller cast. That's without mentioning Keanu Reeves as Johnny Silverhand, who is not like your typical COD campaign cameo, but a full-on character and arguably the most interesting one in the game. He is talking to you a lot. Props to CD Projekt Red for this, okay? They did say that Keanu Reeves was going to have a big script to read off of, and I thought, well, it's Keanu Reeves. The guy's got to be somewhat expensive, and maybe they spent a lot of money on him, but it was worthwhile. He really improves the game. I thought the casting decision was awesome, not only from a star level, but also just... yes, it's Keanu Reeves, man. He did a good job. He fits the personality of this character perfectly. Throughout the story, you'll be engaging in a ton of conversation, which shines a spotlight on 2 things to me. 1, the amount of dialogue despite V having a female and male voice, and 2, the detail of the animations and conversations. Unlike past RPGs, just because Cyberpunk is a humongous game and has the protagonist voice, it doesn't feel like things are held back for the most part. I was allowed to ask plenty of questions, conversate with a lot of characters. Now, it's not on the level of a BGS game, but still, lots of conversations to be had. And the fact that the game also properly responded to my gender depending on who I picked, plus conversation options respecting my stats, was excellent to see. Now, as for the animations in this game, it's just a testament to the level of detail and the lacking of corners cut here. There is an emphasis on detail everywhere, from character gestures to conversations to the population density, the diverse districts, the alleyways that host black market shops, the sense of discovery around every corner, and it even carries into the romance scenes, which obviously I can't show, but let's just say here that CD Projekt Red might be driving up traffic on another I don't even want to talk about it, okay? It's very detailed, all right? It's yeah. What's also worth noting is that everything you see is in-game. There is no CGI moment or even cuts to load for a long time. Sometimes you'll have like a little glitch out on screen and it'll immediately transport you to the next mission or the next conversation you're having, and it keeps it immersive. It always has you locked into the experience and nothing is changing in front of you. Now, one of my bigger issues with the main story was actually waiting for missions to start. There were times you were waiting for phone calls, and so they tell you to go off and do other missions, and at first I thought, oh no, like please don't pad this out. I just want to play the story. And there were times that I did have to deviate for an hour tops and just go do side missions just because the game had maybe an in-game timer or something. But that was something that annoyed me because I don't like when a game stops me and says like, you have to do things instead of the main story now. It's like, no, it's my game. let me play it how I want. The other thing that really bothered me in the main story is I'd be like crawling around a mission area. I'm so into it. And all of a sudden I get like a phone call because I crawled into a side quest area and they're like, hey V, got a mission for you. And like, you can't even ignore the call. You know, you'll have an option to answer it, but even if you don't click answer, it'll pick it up anyway. And it's like, you know, imagine if every time someone called you on your phone and you just had to answer it no matter what. Like it's awful. Every spam call you had to answer. And it's one of those things that it's just like, let me ignore it. I'll get back to the mission later. Call me once it's done, or don't have calls come through during missions. It was really strange. And sometimes you'd have someone talking to you and then a call would come in. And so you're balancing like two conversations. It was really strange. But that is the story. What about the choices you're making in this story? How deep does that go as someone who's played RPGs for pretty much their entire life and has enjoyed them thoroughly? And my favorite RPG of the generation is Divinity Original Sin 2, and my favorite RPG of this year is absolutely Wasteland 3. So how does Cyberpunk 2077, a AAA game doing a lot of other things, stack up in the choice department? This is where some of my disappointment sets in. In my experience, there's absolutely 100%, don't get me wrong, choice and consequence, but do not go in expecting something on the level of Divinity Original Sin 2 or Wasteland 3 like I had just mentioned. In the main story, Cyberpunk's choices are mostly shades, unique scenarios, except for certain parts. Perhaps you're working with someone in a side mission and you help them out. Maybe they'll appear in your ending or be mentioned in your ending. It's more along the lines of avoiding combat once and then someone just calls you weak later on. There are nods, but nothing dramatic. Now, I don't think that's terrible because the story had a purpose. There is a choice in the story that is pretty major and it gets the job done. And I thought it was a vast improvement over the storytelling of The Witcher 3. But what infuriated me more than anything in this game, yes, even more than the bugs, was what I like to call the fake skill checks. This needs to leave RPGs, and I hate that Cyberpunk has it. So I'm just gonna show you an example right here. I'm gonna let the gameplay speak for itself. This is me having an option, a skill check, which I do pass, by the way, based off my cool stat, trying to convince someone to get a discount.
How about a discount for your newest customer?
Only give regulars discounts. If you're short, then f*** off.
Why was it even there? The guy told me to fuck myself. Like, what? Why even put that? And I know that sounds dramatic, but they are peppered throughout your experience where it's like, hey, you got the engineering stat, right? Oh, well, what if we hacked in over here and we did this, that? And they're like, oh, well, you have 11 engineering, so it's great you thought of that, but no, sorry, that can't happen. It is infuriating. And the reason I'm pointing it out is not only because I think it's going to upset a lot of players who care deeply about the RPG mechanics, and don't worry, there's areas of the game it absolutely makes up for it, but it's just that for future DLC, you know, big expansions, I really hope they dial in on the skill checks and make them worthwhile. I'm not talking about spiderweb choices, but don't present what seems to be another mission option or a way to go about a mission, and then when I pass the skill check, they're like, here's why you can't do it. Then why do I have the skill check there in the first place? So those are some of my thoughts on the stories as well as the choices that you can make throughout. Now, I said the gameplay sort of makes up for it, and I want to explain that through its deep system, its deep character customization. But before I get to that, I need to underpin the whole conversation with something that did plague my experience for most of the time I played, which was bugs. Now, the bug conversation for Cyberpunk 2077 is very interesting. It reminds me actually of when I reviewed Days Gone. When I reviewed that game, it was pretty much broken, and I posted a review saying this game was really disappointing to me and it barely functioned. And a lot of my complaints really did boil down to not only just the storytelling, but also just the performance of the game. Now, same thing started to happen with Cyberpunk 2077. I logged 30 hours and it was just visual bugs, no quest bugs, but I'd see floating objects. I'd see people T-posing and I'm just like, man, this is so rough right now. But we were playing an unpatched version. So part of me was like, I need to talk about this and make sure people know this. But at the same time, CD Projekt Red during our review process put out a patch, and that patch fixed most of my issues. And apparently that wasn't even the day one patch. That was just like a before the game came out patch. And it super big time helped the game out in the terms of those bugs I just mentioned. It doesn't change that I experienced a lot of them, but it made me start thinking, how much do I really want to discuss this? Because most of you out there may not experience what I had. So I just want to let you all know this game was very buggy, but then the patch came out and it still had some bugs, but it was not even close to as egregious as it was. It felt like every couple of hours, I was seeing something annoying me and it was pulling me out for a second, but I was just like, okay, this is the unpatched version. And once I saw that patch, I went, okay, at least I can rest assured on that. Now, it's not to say it was a fix-all, but I just needed to go ahead and put that out there because that was something pretty prominent in my gameplay experience. But I have to admit, I don't think it'll apply to all of you out there who are watching and buying day one or even like a couple weeks after. Now for the actual gameplay systems. Cyberpunk 2077 boasts one of the most complex character systems, allowing for multiple diverse builds that will encourage replayability alone, where people are seeking to build maybe a cyber ninja or a straight up brawler, a tech guru maybe. The mission and level design respect how you want to play, and it made me so excited to run through the game again and again just to play as a different version of V. Now, let's break it down, because like I said, very complex, and that's coming from someone who plays a lot of RPGs. Starts off with street cred as well as player level. So street cred, as you complete missions, that goes up, it unlocks more missions. It's nothing else. It's not level gating. It's just its own little counter to make sure you're unlocking more and more gigs around the map. So think of it that way. That'll increase as you complete objectives throughout the game. Whereas your actual player level will determine things like stats, will allow you to equip certain weapons or armor, that type of stuff. So it's pretty typical in that manner. But then you go layer deeper into the attributes. So there's attributes like body, which is your health, stamina, melee, intelligence, which is your cyber deck RAM, as well as quick hacks, reflexes, which impacts your evasion, your crit chance, as well as your mantis blade damage, technical ability, which can change how many doors you can unlock, as well as your usage of tech weapons, cool stat, which can impact your stealth, critical damage, all resistances, as well as mono wire damage. And each of these attributes have their own perk trees that define your build. Perk points are earned from leveling up your player level and can be looted around Night City at times, or are earned by increasing your skills. So that's number one of how you shape your build, right? Attribute points, you spend points on those, and then you'll spend perk points to kind of round out your build so that you can start focusing on handguns, hacking, what have you. But I mentioned skills. So I've said this before, I've said it a lot of times actually, but skills really do work like Skyrim. Use your handgun a lot, your skills will go up and your ADS time will increase, your reload time will increase, and there's 20 tiers of those skills. And sometimes as you increase skills, you'll get bonus perk points as well. So it's not just through leveling up where it feels slow. It is, like I mentioned, through looting as well as just earning skills. So it's rewarding, even if you're not a blade build, if you want more perk points, to go out and use a blade, because sometimes you'll just get extra perk points for that. And that's very helpful to the player, I think, in actually progressing your build in a really different manner. So what happens is you can really put your character in a corner where they're extremely good at, like I mentioned, hacking, or they could be a cyber ninja. Like, it is awesome. It felt like it really respected what I wanted to do. And once again, huge tip of the cap, like 80 cap tips to Cyberpunk 2077's level design. It is phenomenal, especially for an open world RPG doing so many different things. The amount of ways you can play this game and the way those missions and those levels respect that, I just cannot put enough emphasis on that. It is really fun to play. I thought it controlled well. I thought it was nice and slick. I really did like it a lot. But that doesn't account for weapons, armor, crafting, all that good stuff. So yes, as you kill enemies or you go to shops, you can get new weapons, new armor, weapon types like power weapons or tech weapons, which can shoot through walls and are the most amazing thing ever. You can craft those weapons by finding schematics around the world or buying them as well. I mean, it is just awesome, man. There's a really deep progression system here. And what's great is when you're in combat, there's stuff like destructible environment. Like I mentioned, shooting through the walls with your tech weapons. Like, dude, there's just so much going on here. There's even dismemberment. So the blades feel really good, right? Like, we even saw Jedi Fallen Order, and I get it, Disney, but still, Jedi Fallen Order had the most visceral animations, but everyone just stayed intact. I'm like, let me cut someone apart. I don't know how else to say it. Also, Ghost of Tsushima, like, thank you, Cyberpunk, for letting me just, if I cut someone's arm, off it goes. That's it. Like, thank you. Especially in an open world game where so much is happening and it probably cost them resources. It's great to see because it made it more satisfying to use that type of build. Now, there's also brain dancing, which is like the Batman Arkham detective mode. So you can really sift through evidence, and a lot of side quests are connected to this. I thought there would be an egregious amount when we first saw this back with Night City Wire, but it turns out that this is very sparingly used, and I really did appreciate that quite a bit. So it made it exciting to hop in here and investigate the visual details, the thermal details, listening in on specific audio, and all the little hidden details that are in a level that you could only pick up on through brain dancing. Furthermore, it does build the world out even more so I really appreciated this an extra amount. But there's also, on top of all this, right, I mentioned side quest lines, amazing mission design, I mentioned the main story, the builds you have, but there's also gigs. So gigs are their own type of side quests, and these also will unlock more and more, as I mentioned, as you increase your street cred level. So gigs are like things such as thievery, agent sabotage, being a gun for hire, hacking into a big base, something like that. These are gameplay focused objectives given to you by fixers who own separate districts throughout the map, and it spotlights once again that level design, usually boasting some optional objectives, but nothing super unfamiliar here. But given the fact that you can wipe out little camps of enemies, discover caches of loot or notes that'll bring you to more loot, they're very simple here. But given that complexity of the gameplay, how many side quests there are that are full-on stories, the main story, it adds to your experience because it's bringing balance here where not everything is a heavy, big, dramatic story. It's well done. There is also a gross amount of lore to read, like a lot. Like it's an insane metric ton. You're finding shards everywhere, and they're like paragraphs on paragraphs. So if you care about the Cyberpunk world, there's a lot here. Some of them are like, you know, notes that you'd see in the Fallout games, like conversations between people, but some of them are like full-on backdrops to the universe that are very important, mind you. Like, you know, what happened 50 years ago, that type of stuff. Like, make sure you read some of these because they do help you understand things happening in the main story. The driving, I thought, felt kind of crummy. It felt very loose is the best way to put it. Like, you were always fishtailing everywhere. It just, no matter what I did, even when I was braking and trying to go slow, I'd just turn and be like, yeah, they need to tighten up the driving. There was also a skip ride feature. So after your conversation was done in a car with someone, you could just press B in my case, and it would just, boom, load you into the next part of your mission. You just didn't have to sit in the car and wait. It would just bring you there. And I love that. I was like, thank you. You know, I got the good part. All right, so this is a major question I got throughout my impressions, and I wanted to really elaborate on it more. That is performance. Now, performance is something I try to stay away from with my reviews because usually I'm playing on console, so it's very simple, like, hey, it ran at a steady 60 or a steady 30, or it dipped sometimes. It's a lot more simplistic there, where on PC, you know, I have a very old rig. The rig I played Cyberpunk 2077 on is 5 years old. My specs were an i7 quad core at 3.3 gigahertz, a 980 Ti with 32 gigabytes of RAM, and it ran at high, managing to hit 60 FPS at times, but dropping down to the high 40s and the low 50s in areas with a lot of action or traffic. Like I said, I try to stay away from this stuff because on PC, I feel like you could have a way better build than mine, but like something's getting bottlenecked or something's just changing and happening there that is really hard to identify. And so I just wanted to make sure that I make it clear that a lot of PCs are hard to test for because it worked for me, but you may have something more powerful than me, but just may end up not working for you in some way, shape, or form there. So for me, it wasn't like this buttery smooth, consistent 60 FPS, but it ran well. It never really chugged. Like when it dropped, it was more of like a steady decline that you could notice because there were so many people there on screen, especially in the cityscape where you're like driving past tons of cars and a large population. That's where I started to see a performance hit. But for the most part, when I was walking around, when I was doing quests, when I was conversating, that was fine with me. But once again, keep in mind, 5-year-old rig, but also do keep in mind, I did not have the NVIDIA update. So I didn't have any driver updates specific to Cyberpunk 2077. In the middle of my review, CD Projekt Red had offered them to me, but by that point, my review was pretty much ready to go, and I felt like it wouldn't have made a major change. And also, just given that my performance wasn't terrible, I felt like it wasn't super necessary to dive into. So do know that is how I played the game. Once again, one of those situations where it's probably not representative of what you exactly are playing. Okay. Before we wrap this up with the verdict, we got to talk about sound. Sound is a big part of Cyberpunk 2077, especially for the efforts they went to create a lot of authentic, original soundtracks. I mean, it is insane how much effort they went into on the sound department, from different car sounds to weapon sounds. You know, the ambient conversations you're hearing, like there are hundreds of them there got to be, because I never heard any of them repeat. There'd be like cops talking about certain gigs they were doing. There were corpos talking about business. There were just husband and wife fights. Like it was just crazy. There was constantly things happening in the city that made it feel like I was just passing by a group of people with their own set of problems. So I really appreciated that on the sound front because it's stuff that's immediately apparent that maybe even if you're not like a big tech guy or girl, it doesn't matter, right? Like you will notice that right away and it builds the world. You'll be like, oh, an extra conversation that I could have just overheard. That's awesome. But it just, I think, goes deeper because they're not repeated from what I've seen. Of course, the performances themselves are never a snooze and everyone reprises their role well, with particular standouts like, of course, Johnny Silverhand, but also shout out to Panem. They both really just stole the show whenever they appeared on screen. I really enjoyed them both as characters, but everyone does a fantastic job. Now, the original soundtrack that they have for this game that you can listen to on the radio is great as a streamer because you can just play the game, which is awesome, right? That is great from a content creation perspective. But in the terms of like hits where I was like nodding my head, oh, this is sick. What I noticed is actually the songs on the radio I was hearing, I wasn't that crazy about, and I think it's just the type of music. It's very electronic and synthy, like I don't know. For me, it doesn't really click with me that often, but I gotta say that for the most part, I think people are going to like it, and I can admire certainly the amount of effort that went into it. What I liked more was the score during big story moments during the gameplay. They would have these individual scores for those moments that I thought were way more of a banger than stuff I was hearing on the radio. Also, there's like this slight growing synth that plays during really intense conversations. Never got old. I loved that stuff, man. It really elevated it, and I think that's what good music does, right? Most of the music you're going to be hearing is going to be through that main story and the quest lines and that like dun 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 dun. It's just insanely helpful in building the emotion of that moment. But when I'm exploring the world, sometimes the radio is just off. I'm going to be honest. Like I don't know, I'm very weird with music. I'm really a podcast guy, but you know, that's why I think Fallout's radio works well, because it's just old music, and when it's not old music, it's someone talking over the mic. But point being is I appreciate their level of effort here, from the cars to the guns and everything you're hearing around the city, as well as the original soundtrack. It's very impressive, but sometimes for me, it just didn't hit as hard. Okay, with that, that's pretty much all the notes I've got that I wrote down. This is my verdict for Cyberpunk 2077. It has lived up to the hype in most ways. I was disappointed by the choice, for sure, because I thought the fake skill checks were there. That kind of reminded me of Fallout 4. Like, it would be like New Vegas, where you'd see them respect it, but imagine if New Vegas just kind of slapped you in the face every time you did that. That disappointed me. The game I played, that you probably won't be playing, was extremely buggy. You'll probably be playing a much less buggier version, but I think there's still going to be bugs, which makes me understand even more why they delayed this game. If it released in September, oh my God, I can't even imagine what that would have been like. So yeah, this game was super buggy through my experience, but it got better with the patches that they released. So that is something very, very important to emphasize once again. The gameplay, however, its flexibility through level design, mission design was phenomenal. It's top tier. It's some of the best you can get in this industry, and people will just be playing this game because it is fun to play and it is fun to build your character and explore the world and just see all the crazy things you can do, from hacking to blades to gunplay, types of guns you're going to use, the loot you're going to get. It is fantastic on a gameplay front, as well as storytelling. This is next level writing, next level storytelling. It's compelling, it's interesting, but most importantly, it is mature. It is very much a M-rated game. I don't know how it stayed in the M-rated range, but it very much is M-rated. There is so much to take in, so much to process. It is very much a hard-hitting story. It is a tale that makes you think about yourself as well as your character. I really appreciated it for that. It resonated in a couple of strange ways, which once again really does help me enjoy a game more. So I think CD Projekt Red really knocked it out of the park here, and it's nice to see at the end of all this a happy ending, right? Normally there's a crash and burning moment here, and we sort of saw that with Crunch, and there are some things to critique, and there will be more to critique as time goes on, right? Because this is my experience, but you may point out something to me that over time I go, you know what, that is kind of bad, right? Or, oh, that is awesome, right? So that's how the conversation develops. But at this point in time here, as someone who reviewed the game before launch, I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it lived up to the hype, in my opinion. I really enjoyed it, and I cannot recommend it enough. I think this is something you do buy on launch, but just be safe in watching out for console performance. This is from a PC front, okay? I don't know how this runs on Xbox One. I don't know how it runs on the Series X. I don't know how it runs on PS4 or PS5. That is stuff that I will figure out alongside you, and that is bad on CD Projekt Red's part, in my honest opinion. That is not comforting at all. So be aware, continue to research, but hopefully this review in some way, shape, or form helped you make a purchasing decision or even a delayed purchasing decision. I think it's worth your buy, but that is through my experience on PC. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I leave it in your hands. Let me know what you think about Cyberpunk 2077, what kind of content you want to see. Let me know. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. Big thank you to each and every single one of you patrons and members out there. We have seen a big boost in that. I appreciate all of you seeing the quality of the content and my transparency and just giving some love over there. Thank you so much. I hope to see a lot more of you join up because we are really pushing the limits here. And just once again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.